Alrighty, guys. So this is a lecture that is going to kind of walk you guys through some basics of poetry. We're going to talk about structure, voice, and word choice and syntax, which is word order. So when you're looking at different types of poetry, there's a few that you really want to keep in mind. So narrative poetry tells a story in kind of a traditional narrative format. An epic poem recounts the exploits of heroic figures. So this would be like Odysseus in the Odyssey. This is often from the oral tradition. These are long, extensive poems that are, thousands and thousands of lines, and they usually kind of retell an origin story of a culture or a people. Ballads are similar. They're typically were intended to be sung, so there's a lot of refrains used. If you remember from the lecture, that a refrain is a repeated phrase that's used throughout a poem to kind of drive home a specific idea or message. These also came from the oral tradition. If you're looking at lyric poetry, there's a few different terms you might want to know. An elegy is a poem that mourns death. So it's, for example, To a Basketball Player Dying Young by Updike. An ode is a long lyric poem that generally has a very complex stanzic pattern. So, for example, Ode on a Grecian Urn by Keats. A lot of times these odes kind of take a symbolic sort of entity. It can be something natural or something man-made, and they basically create an ode around that. An obod is a poem about mourning, literally mourning the morning time. An occasional poem celebrates a particular event or occasion, so that makes sense. I was supposed to say meditation, not medication, I apologize. A meditation is a lyric poem focusing on a physical object as a vehicle kind of representing larger issues. So maybe meditation on, say, I don't know, something representing the waste of resources or something like that. It could be like a piece of trash and how it's representing a waste of resources. A pastoral is a lyric poem that really talks about sort of the pastoral life, the country life. It's very simple. It's very rooted in sort of innocence and naivete. For example, Christopher Marlowe, who you guys will read, has a lot of these type of poetry. It was very popular during sort of the early modern period, or right around and right before Shakespeare. A dramatic monologue is when a speaker kind of talks to one or more silent listeners in the room. So a lot of times they'll use the second person you in these poems, and you'll come across one of those as well. So the speaker in a poem is really important because, like in literature, you have to think about the narrator. So you have to think about, are they trustworthy? Are they naive? Are they sophisticated? Are they any of these sorts of things? The speaker is a persona. It is not necessarily the author. So just like in a novel, you have, say, William Faulkner writing characters. That doesn't necessarily mean that William Faulkner himself is in the novel. It's characters speaking. The same thing with a poem. It's not necessarily Walt Whitman speaking. It's a persona. That said, it can be the author. It can be very similar, and they can be quite alike. And a lot of times, the speakers or the writers' biography and historical influences can kind of shape a poem's ideas or messaging. The speaker can also be an archetypal or set identity. So it can be, as for example, the lover, the ruler, the thief. It can be a personified object or idea as well. If you read Gertrude Stein, a lot of times she does this. Situation, you want to think about the situation or context of the speaker. So think about the audience to whom they are speaking. What is the sort of physical or emotional state that they're in? Are they alone or are they with someone? Are they scared? Are they heartbroken? Are they confident? Are they going mad? There's a lot of different sort of states that they can be in. And then you want to examine the language used to identify those elements. So, for example, in My Last Duchess, which you guys can read, there's a silent listener who is touring this hall looking at these paintings, and this man is talking about his former wife, and he's talking about a painting, and the whole time he's telling the listener, you think this and you say this. So you have this very silent figure who the speaker is talking to. The tone conveys the speaker's attitude towards the subject or the audience, just like in literature. So you want to think beyond the basics here, beyond the tone is sad, the tone is happy, this tone is good or bad. You want to think about descriptive language that you can describe the tone. So is it the tone intimate? Is it relaxed? Is it formal? Is it funny? Is it scared? Is it ironic? There's a lot of different words that you can use to describe tone, and tone can shift during poems. So, for example, the tone in "Because I Could Not Stop for Death" by Emily Dickinson. The first line is, "Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me." It has a very accepting, relaxed tone, which is ironic because she's talking about death and the afterlife. But it's very sort of warm and friendly and relaxed and comforting. Word choice is vitally important in poetry. So you only have so much space in a poem to get meaning across. So the words that you choose are insurmountably important. Words are chosen in very specific order as well, to convey meaning or intent on the part of the author. So we're going to get to that in a moment, but what we're talking about here is word choice. And when you're describing the choice of words by authors, there's some terminology you can use. You can say that they use a concrete word. So this is something that's perceivable, tangible identity. So that is a piece of paper, or that is a book. Abstract words are sort of an idea, a condition, or a quality, something that you can't really touch or feel. So, for example, patriotism or love are abstract words. Specific words refer to particular items. A connotation is what a word suggests. So, if I said, he warmed me like a fire, you have an understanding of what fire is. That it's warm, it's comforting, it's inviting. Specific words referring to particular items. General words refer to classes of items. So poem versus lyric poem. Connotation is what a word suggests. So it can have a particular connotation like light. He was the light of my life. Could have a specific connotation in terms of love, companionship, relationships. A denotation is what is signified without emotional associations, judgments, or opinions. Formal diction comes from sort of very learned vocabulary, grammatically correct language. So think Shakespeare. Informal diction is colloquial language or slang. So, for example, in We Real Cool by Gwendolyn Brooks, she says, "We real cool, we skip school, I can't remember the rest, we jazz June, we die soon." So the language is not formal, but it still conveys a certain meaning. So colloquial, again, is where you're using a particular group of people, a region, an age group, a sort of language of a particular era or movement. That's colloquial language. Word order is syntax. So syntax is essentially why an author puts words in a particular order. And again, in poetry, this has immense significance. So the order of the words creates emphasis on a particular word or idea through the rhyme, through the physical positionality on the page, or through unusual grammatical structures. So a lot of times poets will manipulate word order to create sound or meter changes as well. So we are going to kind of dive into some of these, but that is structure, voice, and syntax.